In chapter 3, we were always working with a single column of data, a single list. And then sometimes we had a frequency for that list, but that's all we were working with. In chapter 4, we're going to describe the relationship between two variables. And since they have a relation, that means that they're going to be connected variables, connected to each other, which is also called bivariate data. When there's two columns of data. Okay? All right, so in section 4.1 is where we're going to begin. That's scatter diagrams and correlation. But before we can get into all of that, we need to understand explanatory and response variables. I mean, if we're going to have bivariate two variables, then it would help if we had a way of talking about those two variables, which is the response variable and the explanatory variable. There, I just didn't like that because I changed the color. All right, so the response variable, it's a little bit different than algebra class. So in algebra class, you think of x and y, and we are going to use x and y, but the response variable is actually the more important variable in many ways. So it's the dependent variable, which is the letter y. It's also the outcome variable. I think that's a particularly useful way of thinking of it. So it's the focus of the study. It's the thing that you're trying to learn about. It's what you're trying to find out about. So it's the outcome. And the explanatory variable, which is the independent variable or the predictor variable, and again, I think the predictor is a nice way to think about it, is any factor that can explain variations in that response variable. Why is this response variable doing what it is doing? Well, maybe this variable, this other variable, can explain some of it. And again, the response variable is usually y. The explanatory variable is x. Right? That's the most common letters that we use, x and y, to harken back to our algebra days. But you want to think about the explanatory variable is predicting what can happen with the response variable, the outcome. This is what you want to know about what you're trying to study. Why do students score higher on certain exams? Well, maybe this variable can predict why that happens. Study time or the amount that they slept before the exam, things like that. So those are the explanatory variables to figure out how I can get my test scores to be higher. That's the response variable. All right, so let's take an example of this and try to figure our explanatory and response variables out. Neurologists have a variety of exams they give to patients to determine if they are suffering from cognitive impairment. Illnesses that cause cognitive decline, such as Alzheimer's, have other effects as well, and perhaps these more easily observed symptoms might be useful for predicting the cognitive level of a patient. Researchers recruited 400 people between the ages of 18 and 65 and recorded how long it took them to walk 50 meters in a well-lit indoor hallway. Each person was also given a series of tests designed to test memory and basic problem-solving abilities. These tests were combined into a single psychometric score. Okay, so they're trying to figure out, hey, can we tell if somebody's in cognitive decline from other methods, right? Maybe from watching them walk, that kind of thing. All right, so the response variable is kind of the easier thing to figure out. The response variable is the psychometric score, right? That's the thing they're trying to figure out. Can we get it so that these people have a higher or lower psychometric score? Now the explanatory variable, let's see here. So researchers recruited 400 people between the ages of 18 and 65 and recorded, there it is, how long it took them to walk down the hallway, right? So time it takes to walk 50 meters. They're trying to figure out, hey, can we figure out their score on the psychometric score without having to do invasive things? So can we just watch them walk down a hallway and know that they're going to score higher or lower on the psychometric score, right? Which is a combination. The psychometric score is a combination of the memory and basic problem-solving skill abilities, right? So it's a series of tests on that, right? Which are combined into one score. Now, why did I do it that way? Well, because obviously the psychometric score is really a measure of cognitive ability, right? And they're mentioning that they'd like to find out if they can figure out cognitive ability in some other way, right? For Alzheimer's patients, for example. So they want to know, the researchers want to know, about cognitive ability, which makes it the response variable. Right? So the response has to be this, right? The thing you're actually trying to figure out, how can I measure cognitive ability of patients? And an explanatory is one possible thing that might be exposing or affecting that response variable. So the time to walk 50 meters might be revealing or might be affecting different, well, it's not that it affects it. It's not cause and effect. It's more that there's a relationship going on. And so you can maybe see a patient's in cognitive decline if it takes them longer to walk this 50 meters. Right? So since this is the explanatory because it's the thing that you're looking at to see if it's affecting the thing you're really interested in. This is what they really want to know about, the cognitive ability. And then the time to walk 50 meters may be revealing, may be associated. That cognitive decline or that cognitive ability. But again, that cognitive ability, because it's the thing that I'm most interested in, that's what makes it the response variable. And then this time to walk 50 meters is just one thing that might be revealing whether a patient has more or less cognitive ability. All right, now was this an observational study or a designed experiment? Well, for that discussion, it helps us to go back to section 1.2 and look at the definitions here. An observational study is a study where the researcher merely observes what is happening or what has happened without manipulating the situation and tries to draw conclusions based on these observations. There's no random assignment in that. And then a designed experiment is a study in which the researcher manipulates one or more of the explanatory variables and tries to determine how that influences the response variable. All right, so then that means that our study is an observational study, and here's why. Even though we recruited 400 people, it's not like we have, half of them randomly assigned to walking 50 meters in an indoor hallway and half of them assigned to walking 50 meters outdoors. Or we don't have half of them walking 50 meters and half of them walking 100 meters. We're not manipulating this. We're actually just having them do this, observing it, their times, and then having them take these tests and observing their test scores. Everything is observed. It's equivalent of asking them survey questions. It's just they actually have to physically do something for these survey questions. So this is an observational study. We don't have random assignment. There's no random groups into anything. So there's no manipulation of the explanatory variable because, again, they're not doing different things. Everybody's walking 50 meters. Everybody's taking the psychometric test. So this is an observational study. There's no manipulation of the explanatory variable, which is walking. Explanatory variable. Sorry, I'm spelling that wrong. Explanatory variable. There we go. Which was walking by the researchers. They're just having everybody walk and everybody take the test. Right? That's the equivalent of an observation study. So everyone walks 50 meters. And everyone takes these tests. So essentially you're observing. So the researchers observe both of those things. But they're not manipulating those things. Okay. So sometimes the distinction between explanatory and response can be a little bit strange for people. It's a little bit unusual because we're so used to algebra class where x is stressed above all things. And for us, the explanatory is important, of course, but it's really the response that's the important variable. That's the thing you're trying to know about. I want to know about the cognitive abilities of these people. And so I'm just seeing, are there things that I can look at that might help me gather understanding of their cognitive ability? Right? So it's the cognitive ability that's the most important part. This is the y, and then this is the x.